Wells, welcome to both of you.
Good to be with you.
Great to be with you.
I'll start with you, Keith, just on this New Zealand volcano eruption, of course, with many Australians affected by this, very sadly. Police in New Zealand will now launch a criminal investigation over these White Island deaths. What's your reaction to that? Is this something you welcome?
Well, firstly, it's just an absolutely tragic event. We have any number of Australians who are badly injured receiving treatment. We obviously have a number who are yet to be identified as to where they are and their circumstances. So that means there's a lot of Australian families who are very, very concerned. So firstly, PK, I'd just like to say to any of them who haven't done so already to go onto the Smart Traveller website. There's a 1800 or 1300 number there that they can ring to get immediate consulate support and provide advice for people they might be concerned about. But obviously the New Zealand government will investigate the event. It is a multiple fatality tragedy, so that is no real surprise. But right now, the focus has to be on those individuals who are unaccounted for and those individuals who are badly injured and to ensure they are receiving the appropriate treatment.
That's absolutely right, because this is an unfolding tragedy. But Anika, there are questions being asked and now a criminal investigation as to why these people were there when clearly there was a warning about this volcano. What do you make of this news of a criminal investigation?
You're breaking news to me, PK. I hadn't heard that. I must have been journeying in when that's broken. To add to what Keith has said, though, I think we also need to send our support and thanks to the emergency services workers who have, worked tirelessly to evacuate people off the island, get people to hospitals, and to the health service workers who are dealing in beyond capacity workloads to try and heal and repair people as much as they can, evacuate them home to Australia. And thanks for doing it, and our thoughts are with you at this time.
Let's move on to bushfires, which is really the story of our time and will be for coming months. Keith Pitt, should the bushfires be treated as a national security issue? That's what Malcolm Turnbull, the former Prime Minister, suggested on Q&A last night.
Well, the emergency services at a state level, first and foremost, do a fantastic job. They always have, they always will into the future. We need to ensure that they're adequately resourced. And in Queensland, Patricia, a lot of this comes back to preparation. Now, we know that under the current Labor government, there has been a real reduction in hazard reduction burns for those individuals who are out there that have to face these fires. What that means in a practical sense is that they are hotter, they burn faster, they move further, they're much more difficult to control. So we need to ensure that we do everything we can to reduce risk. That includes ensuring that fire breaks are sufficient and large enough. And that directly comes back to those vegetation laws here in Queensland, where you can't clear more than 20 metres from your structure without a development permit.
With respect,
so I think we've got to get back to the situation.
But my question was very specific, and you haven't addressed it, so I'm going to take you back to it. Malcolm Turnbull says it should be treated as a national security issue. Is this a national security issue?
Patricia, I'm not going to dig up the political bodies of the past. Mr Turnbull's entitled to his view. He's a former Prime Minister, and I'll treat him with the respect that he's entitled to. But our job as federal MPs is to ensure that we provide the support in our own electorates.
And is it a national security issue?
Here.
I'm not asking you to comment on Malcolm Turnbull's character. What he says is that this is a national security issue, is it? Well, as I said, I mean, that he's entitled to his view. It's emergency management at its best for the people who are out there on the front lines. They are incredibly brave to stand in front of a fire that's 60 and 80 foot high with a 40-kilometre-hour wind behind it. That takes real courage. So what I'm about is ensuring that we reduce risk for them and we reduce risk for properties and life at every opportunity. And that means we do need to do more in terms of preparation. We do need to do more in terms of hazard reduction. And do we need to do
availability
more
of equipment and people.
Do we need to do more on what the scientists say is the warming of the planet? Is that the other part of this equation?
Well, if risk increases, then you need to do more about your preparation. That's a fundamental of a common sense approach. So once again, it means larger fire breaks, it means more preparation, it means more hazard reduction burns. And once again, if we look at the environment itself, what happens with these very large and very hot fires is they kill everything. Anything in their path is lost. Whereas if you can do a slow burn in cooler months, you can reduce that hazard and that level of available wood and timber and grass and everything else, well, that means you can certainly control your burns a lot better. So we've got to get back to basics on this, and if the risk is high, we need to do more.
Anika, should our volunteer firefighting forces be professionalised, given now they're working for much longer than they have in the past? I mean, we know that this is an incredibly long fire season. Should we shift our thinking about this?
I think first and foremost we should listen to them when they ask us for help and for more support. I have the Kedron Emergency Hub in my electorate of Lilley that coordinates disaster management for the whole state of Queensland, and some of those workers came to a mobile office of mine a few weeks back to say that they need more resourcing because what used to be a seasonal issue is now a year-round issue. You will remember that we had bushfires in Queensland in the first week of spring. You know, the rainforest was on fire. So I think we need to do better in listening to the fire chiefs, you know, who came to the government in May seeking meetings about more support, because now we have a government who didn't have that meeting, didn't take those steps, told school children in September that they shouldn't skip school to a strike on climate action. In October, they said that people who were talking about these risks were giving needless anxiety to students, and now in December, we have the government telling parents to come and pick up their kids from school because the air quality is so hazardous that they can't stay there and learn anymore. We need to talk about cause and effect.
Keith, Pete, I've got to put that back to you. The professionalisation of the fire services, is that now what we have to start talking about, given we're seeing people volunteer for these extraordinarily long periods of time?
Once again, I can only thank our volunteers. A lot of them are seniors and retirees. They put themselves forward at the end of their full-time working careers. But I'm against this centralisation idea, Patricia. All it does is slow things down. It makes it very difficult to get decisions. There is no one who knows more about their local area than local firefighters. There is no one who is better positioned to make a decision. The idea that you've got to constantly go to Brisbane to work out whether you can backburn or not, whether you can make a local decision or not, in my view, is not right. It makes it more dangerous for the people who are out there doing this type of work, and I think we've got to get away from decentralisation for emergency management. It's such a big country with such a lot of different challenges in different areas. You need that local knowledge.
I want to move on to another big story today, and I've got to say the timing of it seemed unusual given these huge disasters we're seeing with the fires and, of course, this volcano and the Australians affected by this, very tragically. Keith, Pitt, why did the government release the second draft of its religious discrimination bill when parts of the country are battling fires and we know Sydney's air levels are at a hazardous level, and, of course, this New Zealand volcano eruption is still unknown and unfolding? Was today's announcement a little tone-deaf in that context?
Well, not at all. I mean, we continue to govern. We've said we will deliver this bill as soon as we practically can. This has been a reasonable approach in my view. We now have a second exposure and a final exposure draft. My understanding is the Attorney-General received some 6,000 written submissions and had nearly 100 meetings on the first exposure draft, so I don't think there's any surprise that there is a second round for further discussion. So we're pressing forward on an issue which we said we would, but of course we're focused on what's happening in terms of natural disasters.
Sure, but the question is on it being tone deaf, and you've only given Australians till the end of January to engage. Are you deliberately truncating the time? Does this limit the ability of people to raise concerns and affect the way that this will become law? I mean, this makes it much more difficult, doesn't it, for people to interact with this lawmaking?
Oh, well, I don't think so. I mean, there was a first exposure draft. There was extensive consultation. As I've said, 6,000 written submissions which have been considered. There is now another exposure draft for comment, which is available. I mean, this is the standard lawmaking process. So, look, I think Christian Porter's doing a very good job in what is an incredibly difficult subject. I mean, you can't legislate for every possible circumstance, but we're certainly putting forward what we think is a balanced view, and I'm sure there will be further contributions from stakeholders over coming weeks.
Anika, what do you make of this second draft? There are changes to the bill. In fact, the government's made lots of refinements. It affects, of course, even health practitioners, even pharmacists. Are you satisfied where this is at, or do you think Labor should resist elements of this?
Well, I think there are 11 changes, and I haven't committed them all to memory just this afternoon, but I agree that it is hard to genuinely believe the government wants to have a meaningful discussion about this matter when they release a second exposure draft on a day like today, a day where large parts of the country are on fire, some of our cities are choking, there is an emerging disaster just across the pond which has resulted in probably Australian loss of life. Why put it out today? I think Australians would much rather see some leadership from the government on these actual national emergencies that affect our environment, our health and our economy than tidying off something when they've already missed their own deadline on this. We're not going to see it back in the Parliament before February, so why do we need to talk about it today? Our priorities should be elsewhere. Our priorities should be on Australians in peril.
Okay, but on the substance of the changes here, for instance, conscientious objections and allowing workers essentially more freedom, if you want to describe it that way, but being able to express their views in the wake of the Israel Folau case. Do you support those changes?
I've got concerns about, off the top of my head, the one where religious hospitals, say it's a Catholic hospital, they, wouldn't be able to discriminate against non-Catholics, but they would be able to discriminate on the basis of not providing IVF to couples who might need it, for example. I think we do need to have a lot more consultation about this. My understanding so far from the stakeholders who've come out, they've got concerns as well. We do need to have meaningful discussion about this to make sure that any changes brought forward are right and don't impinge upon existing anti-discrimination protections for people. And again, I'd say that today just isn't the day to do it.
And do you think there should be a conscience vote on this? I know that there is an openness perhaps in Labor to doing that. Is that the way it should be handled, or should you all vote together?
I would need to see the contents of the bill first. I don't have any issue with conscience votes where people call for them or there is a consensus that would be the most appropriate action in the circumstances.
Okay, let's move on to another issue, and that's, what I like to call Anthony Albanese's tour to Queensland and the messages coming out of it. Anika, you're in Queensland, so you're the perfect guest. Your leader, Anthony Albanese, is touring regional Queensland. What message are you hoping he will take away from this visit?
The Queensland is very important and I don't know, we don't take kindly to Mexicans telling us what to do, and I think that's why he's emphasising the listening element of his listening tour so much. I know it's something that I've tried to do in the first 6 months. I've had 32 mobile offices since being elected because the landscape has changed since May and things didn't work out the way most people expected, and so we do just need to stop, take stock and listen to people when they tell us what they want from their government over the next 3 years and also beyond that.
Okay, and there are some other messages too. For instance, he's welcomed the jobs coming from the Adani mine. Is that something you support as well?
On Adani isn't the shibboleth for whether or not people are serious about action on climate change, and that's something that progressives really let the climate skeptics frame during the election, and the result we got was that the climate skeptics won, and we now have 3 more years of inaction on climate change. I think, if anything, the lesson for us out of the federal election and the issue of Adani was that Adani is the shibboleth for regional Queenslanders prioritising jobs. That's what it meant for them, and the lesson we have to take from that is that they want governments who can make good jobs policy. And while climate change has many challenges, it also has a huge opportunity in the potential of the renewable industry to make Australia a new clean superpower. And that's something that the Queensland State Government has done a good job on, creating jobs out of wind and solar projects in regional Queensland in the past couple of years. That's absolutely the opportunity that we have at a federal level as well. And that's where I want to see the focus and the debate centred on in the next few years.
Okay, so is it your view that the jobs coming out of Adani should be welcomed very openly by Labor then?
It doesn't matter. It's a private project.
Well, you say it doesn't matter, but obviously it did matter politically, which is why the question's being asked.
I think, at the time, like I said, the landscape has changed. Now all state and federal approvals have passed. It will rise and fall on the market. These markets are fading and people shouldn't give false hope about the future of these industries. The potential is in renewables and the market reflects that, and that's where we should be focusing our energy. And I just think when we have these debates about one particular mine, we are shortchanging ourselves both of a meaningful debate about the opportunities, and we're allowing the climate skeptics to frame the debate and cause unrest where we have so much in common and so much opportunity as progressives to work together to actually create meaningful change.
Well, on that, Keith Pitt, we're having this bushfire emergency, and I've already touched on this with you, but really we had, this debate, which I found a bit sort of circular in some ways, saying we can't have a debate about climate change and the impact on bushfires while there is a bushfire emergency. Do you think we can ask those questions and have that discussion now?
Well, firstly, a couple of points on what Anika said. I mean, it's a bit hypocritical.
No, I asked you a question. I asked you a question.
Religious discrimination, and I'm happy to answer it. But Mr. Albanese is out at Barcaldine trying to convince the resources sector he now supports the coal industry. He's trying to convince Queensland that the leopard has changed its spots. I just think that's incredibly unlikely. People won't be fooled. But look, in regards to your question, we have taken a balanced and proportional approach. We are meeting and exceeding our targets, and we expect that to continue.
On the basis of carryover
all the
credits.
agreements we have internationally.
On the basis of carryover
but we are delivering exactly what we said we would. We have $3.5 billion put away for the Climate Solutions Fund. The forecasts are that we will meet our targets. Australia should be proud of that fact. So we are doing our part in a proportional way without destroying the Australian economy.
But on the question
again,
of whether
Mr.
we can have a
Albanese is
discussion, not about Anthony Albanese, I ask you about whether we can have a discussion, a measured, good conversation about the impact of climate change on, for instance, a bushfire crisis. Do you think we should be able to have that conversation?
Well, I'd suggest that conversation's been running for some 10 years, and it continues. So right now, the immediate facts and the immediate issues are about dealing with the emergencies that we have. That is people on the ground, people at risk, life and property at risk, and we're doing everything we can to manage that. We have Angus Taylor, who is over putting forward Australia's proposition around what we are doing on emissions. And as I've said, we have a proportional response based on our contribution.
I want to thank you both. It's been a really good conversation this afternoon. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks, PK. Have a good one.
Great with you, viewers.
And that's LNP MP Keith Pitt and Labor MP Anika Wells.